This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ethiopian authorities detain more than 70 UN-contracted drivers amid reports of mass arrests. World Food Programme says food security crisis in the DRC could worsen in the coming months. And Nigeria's military seeks review of how its budget proposals are processed. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Ramanyang joins me now with your business headlines.
That's right, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in the next half hour. Fish exporters in Uganda are expressing concerns over the steady decline in fish stocks. We'll have the details. And financial inclusion in Nigeria might be under threat given the large shutdown of bank branches and ATMs. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Mahia.
Rama, thank you. We begin with Ethiopia, where the UN says 72 truck drivers contracted by the WFP remain in detention. In a statement released on Wednesday, it called on the government to ensure their safety. The drivers were arrested on November the 3rd in the capital of the Afar region. A UN spokesperson says the United Nations is liaising with the government to understand the reasons behind their detention. The spokesperson added that drivers were arrested on the only functional road leading to the Tigray region. This comes as another 16 local staff members and dependents remain in detention in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. Well, let's get more insights into that story. We're now joined by CGTN's Girum Chala in Addis Ababa, as well as John Terrett at the UN headquarters in New York for more. Girum, do you have more information at this time regarding the alleged detention of these 72 truck drivers?
Well, we have tried to speak to authorities here. As you remember earlier, the Ethiopian government had detained about 16 UN workers, so all of them Ethiopians, but these are local staff. And then yet another detention has also happened, and it's been announced. These ones, as you've said, are truck drivers. Allegedly, and according to police source, these people have been perhaps detained because of their role of transporting aid from the central part of the government, the country, to the Tigray regional state. In the middle, as you know, so many hundreds of trucks have been left behind in the Tigray regional state and they never returned. So it could be in this relationship, but still, Mahia, police needs to come out clear as to why they have been detained, but the detention can be confirmed from this side.
And John, coming to you in New York, what is the State Department there saying about Jeffrey Feltman's trip to Ethiopia?
Well, that's right. We've had two bits of movement regarding the Ethiopia story here on this side of the Atlantic within the last couple of days. In the last 48 hours, the State Department in Washington, D.C. has issued a news release which said that it thinks there is a small window of opportunity to work with the African Union, the leading body for peace and security within the continent, to try and bring this conflict to an end. Now, as you know, it's a very nasty conflict. It's been going on for about a year now, centered on Tigray, and it's spread to neighboring regions as well. 100,000 people more are said to be potentially suffering from starvation, and it's a threat to the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government in Addis Ababa, and there's a coalition of opposition groups marching on the capital, Addis, at the moment. Now, the White House and the State Department have threatened sanctions against Abiy Ahmed and other leaders in the region if they don't make strides to try and sort out this fighting and to stop it. So Jeffrey Feltman's job as the U.S. Special Representative in the Horn of Africa, which of course is where this conflict is basically taking place, he has been in Addis Ababa this week having high-level meetings. He met with Olusegun Obasanjo, who is the High Representative for the African Union, and at the end of that meeting the two had a very similar statement to that put out by the bosses back in Washington, D.C., that they think there is a short short window of opportunity in which they can try and bring some kind of closure to this ongoing conflict. Washington has repeatedly, especially in fact under the Biden administration, repeatedly called for an end to the hostilities, and also within the last 48 hours a very senior UN aid official has let it be known that the UN thinks that there has been no aid in the Tigray region getting into Tigray since October. So the arrest of these drivers is a particular issue for the UN, and here in New York they've said that they're very deeply concerned and they've called for their immediate release.
And Girum, turning back to you again, what are the implications then of the tension between Ethiopia and the UN on mediation efforts and delivery of humanitarian aid in Tigray?
Maya, first of all, the detention of the drivers and all this, according to officials here, gets echoed, but Ethiopian authorities have their own dissatisfaction, unhappiness, if you like, about the UN. First of all, the hundreds of trucks which entered the Tigray regional state, they have never returned. And the UN, the only thing it said is there is shortage of trucks to deliver aid to the Tigray regional state, and it failed to denounce and condemn as well. That's what Ethiopian authorities that we spoke to are saying, that the UN is not addressing issues as it's supposed to, and it's only echoing what what it thinks the government has done. Now, on the other hand, as you know, Ethiopia has said the persona non grata and fired or took out of the country country representative of UNICEF and other people earlier. The UN demanded they return. Ethiopia stick with its plan of keeping them away from the country. Now these arrests. So multifaceted differences between the UN and also Addis Ababa. To answer your question, Mahia, yes, there are going to be difficulties when it comes to addressing the humanitarian issue in this country, as this is an important job that needs to be done jointly between the government and the United Nations. But the hope is that for instance, higher officials of the UN humanitarian organizations have been here consulting with the Ethiopian government, trying to address the most important issue of delivering aid to the people affected in the three regional states, by the way, the Afar, Amhara, and the Tigray regional states. So the hope is this is not going to, largely affect, but obviously there is going to be a hiccup here and there because of the difficulties between the two.
Right. And finally, John, the risk of Ethiopia falling into a civil war is now a matter of international concern. The UN Security Council did meet a few days ago to discuss the growing conflict. What were the main takeaways there?
Well, that was here in New York, and you're right, that was within the last 48 hours or so as well. And this is the second bit of movement that we've had on this side of the Atlantic. The UN Security Council meeting in the chamber in New York, hearing a very, very blunt, stark warning from the Undersecretary General in charge of politics and peace building. She's called Rosemary DiCarlo. She said there is a real risk that Ethiopia will be descending into a wider civil war. She said a region of 110 million people, 90 ethnic groups and 80 languages. We can't predict what continued fighting and insecurity will bring. And Olusegun Obasanjo, the High Representative for the AU, appeared in that meeting virtually from Addis, and he said politicians both in Addis and in the north are well aware that what's being fought over are basically political issues, and all agree, he said, a political solution via dialogue is the way forward. Now, Ethiopia's ambassador appeared at the same meeting in person and said this is not a two-sided conflict. This involves the government that represents the people of Ethiopia and the TPLF, which is advancing criminal atrocities, he said. Now, the one thing that came out of this is that the UN Security Council is united on the need to get aid into the Tigray region and other areas where it is badly needed at the moment, where hundreds of thousands of people are potentially facing starvation, and that they want the African Union to be the lead agency in all of this. So the African Union is being put in the vanguard of trying to solve this conflict. Meanwhile, Rosemary DiCarlo left them all with this ringing in their ears. She said that the risk of civil war in Ethiopia is now only too great.
Right. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your insights there. Girum Chala in Addis Ababa, as well as John Terrett joining us from New York. Moving on, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, around 27 million people are food insecure. The Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Food Programme fear the food crisis could worsen in the coming months. Even where food is available, high prices and falling incomes mean many people are unable to afford proper nutrition. The latest IPC report says the alarming hunger numbers are likely to remain unchanged through the first half of 2022. FAO has already scaled up its support to the most vulnerable in the country, but it needs $65 million to reach 1.1 million people. So far, it has only received $4.5 million.
The reason why we are there in such a fertile environment is not because people cannot produce their food. It's really because due to insecurity, due to movement, especially when attacks occur during the harvest season, full crops are completely lost, which put these people in such a situation.
Well, let's get more details on that story now. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa joins me live now from Kinshasa. Chris, the UN is warning that the food security crisis in the DRC could worsen in the coming months. Just how bad is the situation there? Well, we will, of course, try to find Chris and get more details on that story later on. Moving on, political uncertainty continues in Sudan after the military took power last month. The ambassadors of the United States, the UK and Norway met military leader Abdel Fattah el-Burhan on Tuesday. They called for the restoration of civilian leadership in the country. Naba Muhyiddin visited a number of streets in Khartoum today for an update on the situation.
It's been few weeks now since the political unrest in Sudan. The transitional government was dissolved after the military controlled the power, and the new one is yet to be formed. Although many businesses have resumed work weeks after the unrest, others are still skeptical, fearing the lack of security and fragility. This is Al Arabi market. Before the political turmoil, it was one of the busiest markets in Sudan. Traders now are complaining an economic recession due to the lack of the customers and the purchasing power. This is Al Ma'arad Street. Thousands of people rallied here last week, condemning what they called an undermining of democracy. While mediation efforts are underway to contain the dispute between the generals and civilians, protesters put barricades again and say November 13 is the day of a march of million protests if the rule is not restored to civilians. Naba Muhyiddin, CGTN, Khartoum, Sudan.
Well, let's take you back to that earlier story in the DRC where around 27 million people are said to be food insecure. Chris Ochamringa is now live for us in Kinshasa. Chris, as we've heard, the UN is warning that the food security crisis in the country could worsen in the coming months. Just tell us how bad the situation is.
Well, Mario, the situation is very bad. I mean, that report paints a very grim picture for the food security situation in this country. Now, last year, before the COVID-19 pandemic struck, the World Food Programme released a report indicating that the DRC was the world's second largest hunger crisis after Yemen, with about 15.6 million people who were facing acute hunger. Now, that figure has shot up to 27 million, about a quarter of the population of this country, which is a very bad state of affairs. Most of the food that is consumed in the DRC comes from neighboring countries like Angola, Zambia, Rwanda, Uganda, you know, and because of a host of a number of factors, you know, that have led this country's agriculture sector, you know, to remain back for very many years. Mahia?
And Chris, looking at how this affects the actual people of the DRC, what is the impact of the food crisis on the population, and how are the local people there dealing with it?
Well, many of the local people have no choice, especially in the east of the country where, conflict has forced millions of people, to be displaced to other areas. The UN says there are about 5 million internally displaced people in the DRC. So these people have been always going to their fields to farm, but now because of constant attacks by rebel groups in the east, they've had to leave, relocate to camps where they're relying on handouts, from aid agencies. They have no choice because farming is their main source of livelihood for very many people in the east. That area has very fertile soils, and they also send some of that food to other cities, large cities where they fetch more profit. But it's not possible for them to do so because of a number of factors. There's a problem of poor roads in this country. There are farmers who produce a lot of food, but they cannot transport it to areas where they can get, a market. And so those are all factors that have played into the country. And scientists are also saying that climate change, is also affecting the production. People are getting poor harvests. So these are all contributing to the problem that the people in this country are facing. They have had to rely on, food from neighboring countries, which comes at a higher cost. But because they have no choice, they have to continue doing that. Mahia?
All right, thank you very much for talking to us, Chris Ochamringa from the Democratic Republic of Congo's capital, Kinshasa. Moving on, political uncertainty continues, or rather moving to Burkina Faso. Well, General Gilbert Diendere, a key defendant in a trial over the 1987 assassination of Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader Thomas Sankara, has pleaded not guilty at landmark proceedings. The trial is taking place in a military court in the capital Ouagadougou. Diendere was allegedly an architect of a coup during which Sankara and 12 of his colleagues were gunned down by a hit squad 34 years ago. The 61-year-old faces charges of harming state security, complicity in murder, concealing bodies, and witness tampering.
We believe that he may not have pulled the trigger, but he was the direct supervisor of all these operations because the men who acted were under his command. The place where the intervention took place was under his custody, under his responsibility. Then, after the events, more importantly, all this must be noted. It was done to support the regime in place, but it is he who took all the necessary measures, in particular by reinforcing the security.
We realize that General Didiere's role in the assassination of Thomas Sankara is negative, and he has explained since this morning that he was never part of the commando, and in any case, those who fired the shots are identified by name. He explained it even in his capacity as deputy of the CNEC. He explained his role, and his role was notably negative in this case.
Japan's lower house parliament has re-elected Fumio Kishida as the country's prime minister. Kishida's post-election cabinet is expected to officially be announced later today and is assumed to be largely unchanged as the government begins work on a new pandemic stimulus package. However, Kishida has appointed Yoshimasa Hayashi as the country's new foreign minister. Well, it's time for us to take a short break. Here's what's coming up. Nigeria's military seeks review of how its budget proposals are processed. And we cast a spotlight on the challenges that Kenya's matatu sector faces.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Athens, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, Welcome back and thank you for staying with us on Africa Live. The Nigerian military is seeking a review of how its budget proposals are scrutinized, approved and disbursed for it to tackle insecurity in the country. The government is trying to deal with an insurgency as well as kidnappings and killings mainly in its northern region, while still grappling with a shortage of funds to tackle the problem. Our correspondent Phil Ihaza reports now from Abuja.
Horrific scenes of attacks by suspected Boko Haram members in 2014. This is just one of many since the militant group began its campaign of terror in 2009. Military officials say that to effectively tackle the insecurity challenges and bring lasting peace to the country, more funding is needed.
In preparing for year 2022 budget, Nigerian Army proposed a sum of 710 billion only. However, the budget ceiling of the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning reduced our proposed sum of 710 billion to a total sum of 579 billion only. This reduction would impede the capacity and tempo of Nigerian Army in carrying out its constitutional duties, particularly the ongoing war against Boko Haram terrorists and other criminalities across the country.
The reduction in the Nigerian military's budget is the result of a fiscal policy of the government. It's known as a budget ceiling or envelope system, which controls and audits expenses so as to prevent overspending. And despite the request from the military for more funds to be allocated at will, some experts believe exempting the armed forces from fiscal discipline may encourage corruption.
I think it is a product of genuine considerations on their part, but it is not enough reasons for them to seek non-inclusion in the envelope system of budgeting, because budgeting and appropriations implies a sense of discipline. If you leave it open, it can stand abuses.
Over the past 7 years, over $20 billion from the country's budget have been spent on security, and there have been some cases of misappropriation of funds. Last year, a former top army official was found guilty and dismissed from the service for stealing and transporting large sums of money, about $1 million. So, experts believe that rather than removing the cap on the military's budget, better planning and projections should be made by the forces to ensure adequate resources are available when needed.
I will say they should be very proactive. If they know there is a need for more money, they should justify it, come with a supplementary budget. The door will always be open to them.
The Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning says it's doing its best to prioritize funding for the military as well as other agencies despite the challenges the economy is facing.
It's not clear whether or not the request to be honored by the government. What is clear is the concern of an average man on the street. For them, security and safety is key to surviving and being productive citizens. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And staying in Nigeria, as the country is experiencing an increase in the number of livestock grazing in urban areas, particularly in the capital city, Abuja. This is despite a 2016 ban on open grazing of cattle within the Federal Capital Territory. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports on what's driving this trend in Abuja.
Cattle grazing. This has become common sight in Nigeria's capital, not just in rural communities, but also urban settlements like this. An uncomfortable situation for residents here.
Sometimes you're driving, see them crossing the road, you need to wait for them to cross before you pass. It's kind of frustrating. And such things can cause accidents.
Some, you look at the back of their compound, they were able to put up some little farming that will help them in one way or the other. And imagine, so from nowhere, some Fulani will just bring their cows, destroy your farm, destroy a lot of things.
The Federal Capital Administration had in 2016 prohibited open grazing of cattle, but some herders continue to ignore the ban. The Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria, popularly known as Meiti Allah, say their members aren't responsible for infiltrating streets and highways.
I believe these cows that are roaming the streets today in the FCT are owned by some big men in the cities. They keep them in the cities. They employ the services of pastoralists used to take them around for rearing.
Pastoralists say they've suffered great losses in the hands of cattle rustlers. That and the effect of climate change have left them in search of safer and greener pastures. Nigeria has been seeking ways to avoid open grazing. Several states across the country have adopted anti-open grazing laws which ban open nomadic herding, with ranching as an alternative.
We are never opposed to ranching, any form of ranching. We are never opposed to any form of settlement of the pastoralists. But what we always say is, these things must come as a process. Bring a model that can suit these peculiarities so that the pastoralists can go into it easily. But if you are talking of a ranching, that one has to acquire a land, do this, and it's capital incentive.
City dwellers say a town grazing ban isn't just enough. They want government to provide a law that would force the cattle out of the city and sanction defaulters. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, one of Kenya's main means of public transport has grown in popularity, but is still often criticized over safety issues as well as the lack of order in the sector. Matatus, as they are popularly known, are minibuses that ferry commuters in many parts of the East African nation. But passengers have to contend with challenges as they board the matatus for their daily commute. Our Nick Mudimba now reports.
With the aim of creating more jobs in the public sector, the matatu industry came into existence in Kenya, but it has always been a chaotic sector. There has been a tug of war with local authorities for many years. It has been a disappointment year in, year out. Back-to-back accidents, passenger and luggage mishandling, combined with other societal vices.
It's chaotic, and whenever you are there, you are scared because you don't know what is coming to happen to you next time.
We take a ride in one of the vehicles plying a busy route in Nairobi. Not easy as a motorist or even a passenger to handle the adrenaline from the driver and his assistant. The ambience is also unforgiving but preferred by many passengers. The loud music is literally not for the faint-hearted, but the drivers are distancing themselves from the frequent accidents being witnessed in the city and around the country.
Most of the people who cause accidents on the road are motorcycle riders. At times, they want to squeeze in spaces which are impassable. They are the most careless and not keen.
According to Kenya's National Transport and Safety Authority, between January 2021 and September 20th, 2021, some 3,212 people had been killed in accidents as compared to 2,560 who died in a similar period last year, an increase of 652 people. Of those who have died this year, 1,111 are pedestrians, 311 drivers, 520 passengers, 318 pillion passengers, 61 pedal passengers, and 891 motorcyclists.
They want to make more trips. They don't want to sleep. They don't want to relax. A driver will come and immediately the driver will want to go back to the same destination that he has come from. And normally our transport system here, vehicles take at least 5 hours in the road, 5 to 6 hours. So instead of that driver to take his time and at least relax so that he can continue with this journey, he comes immediately, he picks the other passengers and he goes.
The authorities are now developing comprehensive, highly publicized road safety awareness campaigns and programs amongst the stakeholders of public transport vehicles aimed at behavior change.
Despite it all, many passengers prefer convenience, and on the other hand, drivers are under pressure to hit targets, hence they don't really bother about the welfare of the passengers. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Now, veterinarians in South Africa are investigating a sharp rise in the deaths of Cape fur seals along the country's western Cape coast. Thousands of carcasses have been discovered so far, and early indications are that the seals may have died of hunger or malnutrition. CGTN's Travers Andrews has the details.
Cape fur seals are dying in their numbers, with hundreds of their carcasses being discovered every day along the coastline. While some deaths at this time of the year are considered a normal occurrence, the high mortality rate appears highly unusual. Authorities are investigating the matter, and veterinarians are conducting autopsies to establish the cause of these recent deaths.
What is concerning is the large numbers of dead seals that we are finding. We've been monitoring this for a while during our processes in combating avian influenza outbreak amongst wild seabirds. So we've been picking up the numbers of dead seals that are rising. It does appear that there might be a few in the low thousands of seals. Difficult to say how many per day at the moment, but certainly more than hundreds.
For now, Cape Town's 2 seal island colonies don't seem to be at risk, but the animals remain vulnerable. This is a matter of concern to those in the tourism industry, because trips to view these seals are an important contributor to the local economy. While avian influenza has largely been ruled out as a cause of deaths, early indications point to hunger as a possible cause of mortality.
Early theory, it's just a theory, there's no evidence for it yet. It indicates that it might be malnutrition, so a lack of food. It must be noted there are extremely high populations of seals at the moment along the shoreline, but we don't know what's causing these deaths, and we are hoping on an outcome from the results.
While the autopsy results of the dead seals is expected in a few days' time, more carcasses have been discovered every day along this coastline. Authorities have buried almost 200 dead seals in just a week, and that number is expected to keep on rising. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Well, it's time for all the latest in business. Rama is back with the latest.
That's right, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in business news. We'll explore why Ugandan fish exporters are deeply concerned about a decline in fish stocks.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Let's start in East Africa. Fish exporters and processors in Uganda are deeply concerned that they could soon run out of business, mostly because of dwindling fish stocks. Data from the Bank of Uganda shows that the value of fish exports fell by nearly 40% from $10.6 million in January down to about $6.5 million in July this year alone. And that decline is showing no signs of abating. Here's CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga exploring why.
It's not business as usual at this factory in Entebbe. Fish processors say they are operating below previous levels.
You'd be having all morning and most of the afternoon trucks coming to offload fish. You'd have at least 25 tons of fish offloaded, put in ice. The capacity of this factory is to produce more than 50 tons of ice every day. So we calculate for every kilo of fish, you need about 2 kilos of ice. You'd see very many employees compared to what we have now.
From 5 days a week, the factory now operates 3 days a week. On a busy day, this factory would process about 50 tons of fish per day, but this has reduced drastically to 10 tons per day, something that is worrying fish exporters. Fish processors say illegal fishing methods are denying them enough raw material to process. Most of the Nile perch fish is harvested as immature fish illegally, and it never reaches the factory. The fish is then sold to illegal markets, more specifically to the Democratic Republic of Congo, leaving the factories with nothing to process. The fish processors are now worried that could force them to close.
We have fixed costs that are very high, so it obviously affects enormously our profits. And the risk is, of course, if you go into sustained losses, you may end up by just stopping your operations.
But local authorities say they won't let this happen.
We are going to fight this, and we're not going to sleep, we're not going to sit. This must stop. We need proteins in our country. We need the products of fish. We need to help our country to put value addition to the fish.
Fish exports are among Uganda's top foreign exchange earners. The government has now beefed up the fish protection unit with more personnel working to stop illegal fishing. And as the government casts the net wide to increase the stock in Lake Victoria, exporters like Borel are hopeful that they will get enough perch to keep in business. Hilara Isga, CGTN, Entebbe, Central Uganda.
On to Tunisia now. The North African state needs to invest in a lot more renewable energy as the world moves away from using fossil fuels. Those are some of the recommendations coming out of Forum on Governance in the energy sector, which the country is hosting in its capital, Tunis. CGTN's Alan Chachi was there.
The National Company of Oil Distribution says prices of energy products in Tunisia are increasing, while access to the distribution market remains under license.
The import of fuel is monopolized by one state-owned company. This situation causes distortions that affect both the state budget, the purchasing power of citizens, and an increase in factor costs for Tunisian companies, while the cost of investment is very high. The reality of the national and international markets is different from domestic oil prices.
Energy experts at the Syndicate Chamber of Oil Distribution Companies know that the Tunisian energy market is not attractive compared to other African countries similar to Tunisia, which are not hydrocarbon producers.
Tunisia's energy market is 100% administered by the state, not only at the price level but also at the margins. The margins are around $25 per cubic meter, while the country that comes next is at $45 and around $150 in Morocco. Despite Tunisia's potential in terms of infrastructure and margins, we are ranked almost last in terms of foreign investment because our market is not attractive.
According to the Ministry of Energy and Mines, 97% of Tunisia's electricity is generated from fossil fuels, mainly natural gas. Only 3% of Tunisia's electricity is generated from renewables, including hydroelectric, solar and wind energy.
Tunisia has set a target to meet its 30% of electricity needs from renewables by 2030 and produce 3,800 megawatts. We started with 500 megawatts from renewables. This is the first step to achieve the national objective of improving the energy mix and reducing the high cost of hydrocarbons.
The Tunisian government has announced that after a delay of several months, the first photovoltaic power plant in Tozeur, southern Tunisia, is finally operational. Its official inauguration will take place in early 2022. Tunisia's oil and gas production covers less than 40% of its needs. The difference is covered by imports. The unpredictability of fuel prices at the international level weighs in on the state budget. The 2021 budget was drafted on the basis of $45 for a barrel of oil, while the current price is over $80. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
All right, then away from the continent to the fourth edition of the China International Import Expo. CGTN's Yang Qingxi has the details on the outcomes from the 2021 event.
This marks the end of one of China's biggest business events of the year. Organizers say some 480,000 people visited the expo, and tentative deals worth $70.7 billion were signed.
The pavilion of the Import Expo is a very lively place because every few minutes there is a deal signing ceremony.
The medical pavilion offered 135 new products and technologies. That's the highest among all pavilions.
German-based medical firm Boehringer Ingelheim signed a deal with a district government in southwest China's Chengdu city for a stroke rehabilitation center.
I think CIE represents a great opportunity to meet different provincial governments and also different partners. So it brings together the important stakeholders for future development.
Chinese purchasers also hailed the SIIE as a platform to deepen strategic relations with foreign partners.
If it weren't for this platform, our collaboration with our partner would be limited to a technical level. But thanks to the Expo, we have now built strategic collaborations.
The annual CIIE has been running since 2018, and each year we've seen a growing number of exhibitors utilizing this giant expo and the latest technologies to expand their business opportunities. Some have used live streaming in their pavilions to promote companies and products and even to recruit potential talents. The use of new technologies was not limited to exhibitors. Expo organizers also made good use of them. Because of the ongoing pandemic, organizers set up online exhibitions for participating countries and international institutions for the first time.
China's virtual pavilion was welcomed by many people both at home and abroad. The site has been visited over 58 million times.
It's been 4 years since the first Import Expo was held, and since then, the event has become more versatile in finding new ways to promote business. Yang Chengxu, CGTN, Shanghai.
Double 11, named because, of course, it takes place on the 11th day of the 11th month of the year. It starts the day after CIIE comes to a close. Now, last year, goods worth over $115 billion were traded across platforms owned by Alibaba and JD.com. This year, exhibitors in the world's largest shopping event are looking at how to make the user experience a lot more convenient to shoppers both online and offline. Chen Tong takes up the story.
What if something catches your eye whilst you are touring an exhibition hall? Well, it's as easy as scanning a QR code, which then leads you to the online shopping mall where you can enjoy all your Double 11 discounts.
It's not the first time products displayed at Expo are for sale during the Double 11 shopping festival. But this year, vendors are making purchasing their products much more easier.
Sportswear brand Skechers has been attending the China International Import Expo for 3 years now. But it's the first time they put a QR code beside each product, allowing attendees to purchase the products that interests them in an instant.
Last year, during our exhibition, so many customer visitors has expressed that they want to buy our products. So it's an inspiration for us. We want to bring the online shopping experience. We want to integrate online and offline here in our expo.
And the sellers' enthusiasm is stemming from the increasing popularity of imported products in China. Data from the e-commerce site Tmall shows that from 2019 to 2020, sales of imported products recorded an increase of more than 47% during the Double 11 festival. And displays at the Expo this year have become an impetus for local visitors to buy.
I saw many new items like food, clothes and shoes, which definitely piqued my interest.
I saw some stuffed toys that I want to buy. I'm going to compare the online and offline prices first though.
In addition to Skechers, there are many international products making their debut at this year's Expo and Double 11 Festival. Huge brands like L'Oreal, P&G, and Estee Lauder will be showcasing their CIIE exhibits on Tmall.
Build their new products at CIIE and sell them on Tmall. This has gradually become a regular routine for foreign brands to enter the Chinese market.
Foreign companies are more than ready for China's shopping gala, with at least 300 million imported products currently stocked on Tmall, waiting to be delivered into the hands of Chinese consumers. Chen Tong, CGTN, Shanghai.
And I'll leave it there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour. We'll be heading over to Nigeria when we return. We're seeing a record growth in investments there as the economy starts to slowly recover from the economic damage inflicted by the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll have the numbers from that and plenty more at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Mahia.
All right, Rama, thank you very much. Well, still to come here on Africa Live. We'll show you how a growing love for polo is breathing life into Nigeria's accessories industry.
the greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Now, the sport of polo has gained traction in Nigeria over the past decade, and with that comes the need for player accessories like boots and knee guards. Local manufacturers are leveraging the country's leather industry to make polo boots and other accessories for both local and export demand. Kelechi Emekalam has that report.
These are some of the finished products at 828, a leather crafting outlet in Nigeria's northwest Kaduna State. Kasim Abdul Salam Baba established the business 6 years ago, making shoes, wallets, belts and other leather accessories. The graduate of mathematics delved into making polo boots 2 years ago after identifying a high demand for it.
There was a huge gap because you can imagine getting a polo boot you have to send to as far as Argentina for it to be made, like the time, the duration it's been made, the distance, the cost and everything. So it was a huge gap in the market, and we saw that and we took that challenge. Almost 80 to 75% of the polo players in the north already knows about our brand, and since then they stopped patronizing the Argentine boots and started patronizing us.
Nigeria is one of the highest producers of leather and finished leather products in Africa, so Kasim sources all raw materials for his production locally. A pair of his boots sells for between $200 and $450. Now he's empowered over 120 people.
To impact knowledge, see how we can grow the economy in our own little way by providing job, see how we can expand to other countries. We've been doing training as part of our CSR to also build the society and bridge that gap of craftsmanship.
Since I started working here, I had a lot of experience because my boss would teach me a lot of things. Anywhere I go today, I can make a shoe, even if they aren't patterned. I know how to get a pattern for a shoe.
Nigeria's leather export stands at about $272 million, with the highest patronage from countries like Italy, Spain, India, South Asia and China. But lack of skilled manpower, weak infrastructure and poor funding continue to hamper growth. The Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG, projects that the nation's leather industry can generate over $1 billion by 2025. With support from government, local manufacturers like Kasim hope to make African leather brands earn a global spot. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Kaduna, Nigeria.
And it's time for another short break. Here's what's coming up in the sport. Algeria midfielder Soufiane Feghouli looks ahead to the Desert Warriors World Cup qualifiers.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Let's kick things off with the CAF Women's Champions League after the second match day action round of the tournament.